logical guy.
Yeah.
Very systematic.
Denny reprinted one of Paul's charts in his book on how to write comics the DC way. So
Yes, I had Paul do it. I wasn't sure I understood it, so I.
so John, you were saying.
One of my favorite subplots, however, is one that we managed to stretch out for a year.
The pie?
The pie. Someone was throwing pies at members of the squad in their headquarters, and we took a year to finally tell the fans what
Because
it
it was a couple pounds here, a page there. You could run these things.
Yeah.
I miss subplots in a lot of our books. Now, Ron, writing a book like Stormwatch, where it's just Stormwatch, where these characters are not in other books for the most part, what are your challenges there? Since you've got a big cast.
See previous comment about everybody flew and shot energy bolts.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot easier when you're not beholden to other monthly titles for what for if you're doing Avengers, you've got Cap and Thor and Iron Man, and they're all doing something else in their own books. So you can't really affect a huge change to those characters while you're doing that book. That's why when I was a kid, Avengers was my favorite book. And my favorite character in the Avengers was the Vision, because A, he's the coolest character ever, and B, you could actually do stuff with him in the pages of Avengers. He actually had character stuff. He fell in love with a lady, and all that stuff. So you could actually have real character stuff go on with the characters that don't appear somewhere else. Martian Manhunter is the classic JLA example, although he's going to get his own book again now, so we'll see. But generally, when you're doing a team book, the more characters that you have control over, the better for the kind of stories that you can tell. Because then you can do, you can't kill off Captain America in Avengers and sort of neglect to tell the Captain America editor that you did that.
Though they did in the old days, they didn't worry about that stuff.
Not as much,
You guys mentioned Batman and the other characters. That was one of the central problems that the Batman editor has. Because those of you who saw a movie called Batman and Superman realize that there are tremendous problems putting those two characters in the same story with the same central conflict. I've done it in comics. I wondered how they were going to solve that problem in the movie. They solved it by ignoring it.
Oh, no, they did the one thing the comics never did, connect the fact that their mothers have the same name.
Yeah, that's important. That's drama.
It's the superhero safe word. It's the superhero safe word from now on.
Martha?
Anyway, what
Tell it to Devin Grayson. We should
we all, in those things where it had to involve the entire line of books, I always found some little corner that was Batman size. He had to find this box somewhere in Gotham City. That was a Batman sized problem, and he was not directly in the action with all the other heroes. But it's the sort of thing you've got to think about when you're doing this for a living. And, the less said about. Here's what's good about that movie. Bill Finger
Got credit.
got credit finally after 75 years of being gypped.
Now, Mark, you mentioned the champions hitting Dr. Doom in the face. So that raises the question for everybody. When you've got a team, how challenging is it to come up with a proper threat or conflict for them? Because it can't always be Dr. Doom.
No, it's exponential, actually. I mean, it's just two characters twice as hard. Three characters seems to be as 3 times as hard.
Well, one, you need cannon fodder.
Right, yeah.
A lot of times you need, that's why parademons exist.
Bless you.
And I think, the more characters you have, the more difficult it is to actually choreograph it too. And obviously, none of us up here are artists, so we dodge that bullet for the most part. But if you've got a book with 7 different characters, say, they all need to do some bit in the issue, and you've got 22 pages previously or 20 pages now. Everybody needs their moment. that book gets filled up real fast, and your artist ends up hating you because you ask for, well, I need Cap and Thor and Iron Man in this panel together, and they're fighting a horde of Nazis. It becomes, drawing a team book really separates artists who can do the job and artists who can't. It's a hell of a lot more work for the same money, mind you, to draw a team book.
Do you have a system for juggling the character? I have a system.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that, so go for it.
My system for juggling the characters is I literally get action figures out of the closet. Or failing that, trading cards, anything, so that I can have the visuals right in front of me, like chess pieces, to know, okay, wait, Aquaman hasn't done anything for a page. Let's move him forward. And then I just see it right in front of me the whole time, so I'm able to move physically things around. That is my system.
That's just because you want to play
I
with
would
action.
If you were teaching me, I would flunk your course.
All right, well,
Doug works that way.
how about you guys for choreography?
It's, well, there's no action figures or trading cards or, it's just, it's a lot of notes in a notebook and because I break down my scripts by hand first and then type them out. I mean, the work is actually jotting down notes that in my chicken scratch that nobody else can understand. And then, typing it up is the physical labor of it that's actually kind of boring. But doing a team book, it's a lot of notes and a lot of going back through your notes to make sure that, that one of the characters doesn't disappear for 5 pages and go, oh shit, yeah, I need to make sure that this guy, is at least in the background of a few pages, because his bit, we've got to see him on page 7 and page 9, because his bit takes over at page 11, and it can't look like he just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, okay. With the squad, when I first was talked into doing the squad, I told people,
my foot.
we'll talk about this later. But I had to convince myself that I could write a team book. I wasn't at all sure that I could. And then later on, people came up to me and started telling me that I was doing very well. And I had to figure out, what is it that I'm doing? And can I keep on doing it? And I found that for me, I would split off the characters, one character would be here for a couple panels, maybe a page, and then split over to the next one. But by focusing in on 1 or 2 characters at a time, I could advance not only the individual stories, but also the whole story overall, understanding where each character fit in that overall story. Since I was usually doing espionage type stories, I had room to separate everybody out. Somebody came up to me today and said that they really appreciated how in the Russian story, how I used the Penguin. And I did use the Penguin traditionally. He wasn't in his usual outfit, but he was the master strategist, and that's what we emphasize. And also ruthless as hell.
Right, and thank you for
That's
letting me
pretty
bring
great. Out of context quote, I didn't use the Penguin traditionally.
Mark,
I have a question for John, actually. You're unique on this panel for one specific reason, is that you broke into comics, certainly DC Comics, working on a gigantic team book, or essentially Legends. That was your entree, right?
Yeah.
My question is, which was essentially a team book. You had a bunch of subplots. It was the first big crossover event after Crisis on Infinite Earths. 6 issues, and the whole idea was let's reset the DC universe. Len plotted, or you plotted?
No, he plotted
You
the
plotted.
plot.
So what did you learn just from that? That you came in like boots on the ground in a real heavy experience. What did you learn?
Well, first of all, we knew it wasn't going to be 12 issues, it was going to be 6 issues.
Like helpful.
And in order to get into the individual things, first of all, you have to get the overall thing. Where, and to me this is very important in terms of the plot. Where are you going to wind up? What's the goal? Where are you headed to? And then what are the steps that you're using to get there? What are the setbacks for the heroes? What are the advances? How do they finally come together to make it work? But there too, a lot of the time, we were introducing the Suicide Squad and Amanda Waller for the first time in the series. And so how do we do that effectively, and at the same time not have it be all about them? So it's a puzzle. It's a puzzle piece. The analogy I use when I'm working on a plot is that I'm tail weaving. I'm taking this strand and then this strand and weaving them together. And
I think
hopefully-
what, I'm sorry,
And hopefully I get a
I
coherent
didn't mean
plot.
to step on your line.
That's all right. I step on them or trip over them all the time.
What you can learn from what we've been saying here is you should have a method. John's method is not the same as Mark's, but they both have a set of procedures that they go to in order to write a story. What you learn in English classes is they never talk about plot, which means they never talk about structure. And there's a guy named John Truby who teaches screenwriting in California. I completely agree with him when he says that it is the plot and the structure that carry the meaning of the story. So a terrible movie, a science fiction movie, there's this one guy who's praying all the way through it and the other four are like, making fun of him and he's a dope and he believes in God, and at the end they're trapped, they're out of ammunition, there's no way, and rescue comes over the hill. The meaning of that is prayer works. When I saw that, I understood Truby, but I've talked to a lot of recent college graduates, and they don't ever teach plot or structure, and damn it, that's the important part. As I said a half an hour ago, I can't teach you to write like Salinger. I would be doing it myself if I could. But I can teach you what a 3-act structure is. And that's a place for you to start. You don't do, in college you get the idea that, well, you sit down and, you wait for inspiration. Well, you will wait until the sun cools if you wait for inspiration. You have to have a thing you do. It's an active profession.
Along those lines, but not exactly, is that when I teach my writing class, one of the things that early on that I tell people who come in to find out about writing is, I said, there is only one way to write, and that's whatever works for you. And if anybody tells you different, they're trying to sell you something. And that includes me.
All right, let's get back to teams for a second. Ron,
Robert,
what did you want to say?
for those of us who arrived late, did we discuss whether team books are harder or easier?
We've danced around it, but go ahead and address that.
They're harder. At least for me. I found them to be a lot more work and a lot more juggling than just doing Green Lantern or Silver Surfer or Witchblade, which were really single character dramas with other characters orbiting around them, and you were really telling that main character's story and how those other characters ping-ponged off of it. I've found that for me, team books were a lot heavier lift in terms of the structure, of just figuring out how to get from point A to point B because you had a lot more moving parts. And I would assume there are people that just love working on them, but I didn't.
You've worked on so many.
I didn't. He says as he glances toward the end of the table. But I didn't dislike it, but I just found it to be a lot more. You had to put a lot more effort into keeping all the moving parts straight.
Yeah, and the other challenge tangential to that is that when I'm writing a solo book, let's say Daredevil, everything about that story, everything about every scene is filtered through that character, and that character is the voice of the story, and it's very focused, and it's very, you clearly through the eyes of that character. But you can't do that with a team book in the same way. The voice splits up, and then you can't have a team with all of them with the same voice. It's ridiculous. So it's much, you end up telling, I end up telling much different kinds of stories.
Would you say that the team stories are less character driven than a solo hero story?
They're differently character driven. That's a good question. I mean, for me,
they all have to be character driven,
Right.
but I feel like they're,
Yeah.
because you're only getting a slice of each one in a team book, it's if you're gonna do a character arc in a team book, it's gonna take a lot longer than your solo book.
I think it's a fair observation. I do think it is, a team book by nature. Even though it sounds paradoxical because you have so many characters, it is actually, for me, less character driven. Yeah, well
I
said.
Go
got
ahead.
a question for you guys.
My job's easy, they're asking each
You
other.
You can leave, Bob.
There's a famous, there's a famous story, they were filming a Raymond Chandler book out in Hollywood, and they found that by the end of, as they were completing the movie, there was one murder that wasn't really explained.
Yeah.
Huh?
The chauffeur, who killed the
Yeah,
chauffeur?
who killed the chauffeur? And which one was that?
Big sleep.
Big sleep.
Yeah, Big Sleep, yeah. And so they call up Chandler and ask him, who killed them? He says, I don't know. So
Round up the usual suspects.
here's my question to you guys. Because you're playing with so many parts, have you ever lost track of some of them?
I'm sure I have, but I don't know it.
Well,
Because I lost track of it.
Well, I mean, there are whole websites dedicated to all the plot lines Chris Claremont never ended in
Right,
X-Men.
right.
And we have not mentioned the X-Men here.
Oh, that's funny, that's true.
Which is the successful team book.
Of all time, yeah. So, yeah.
And we would sit in DC's offices trying to figure out what the hell Chris did to make it work, because as you just said, sometimes subplots just trailed off.
You know, I think in a lot of ways, Chris did everything everyone here was talking about, because he was handed this international conglomeration of X-Men that Roy Thomas and Len Weir, conceived. And then Chris took them and realized, well, I've got this Russian guy who's this big metal thing, and I've got the short Wolverine guy, and I can tell different stories with them. And so he told the science fiction story, and he told the possession story, and he brought in new villains and old villains, and rethought this and kept changing the group dynamic, and that changed the relationships.
And Levitz's conclusion was finally, even if the plots didn't always parse, you always had the feeling that something was happening.
Yes.
Or something was about to happen.
Yeah.
And he delivered on that mostly.
Yeah.
He'd introduce a new character.
And I think Chris at his best is when he had a good collaborator.
Yes.
I think he and Dave Cockrum did some really lovely stuff, and then Dave came off, and then this Byrne guy showed up, and it was just this whole other book. But he was equally successful with Paul Smith, I think, and then later Jim Lee. And
Yeah.
just,
Well, and I think it also, again, X-Men is sort of like Legion.
yeah.
Nobody else, none of those characters had other places to be until Wolverine got to be a big deal and was
Right.
like 15 books a month. So it's much better as a writer to have a free hand with your characters than to have to be beholden to what somebody else is going to do, next month, and you have to set it up. It's a whole different set of rules for you if your team is your team and you're not borrowing from other places.
Get back to building a team for a second. The other piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about, and it's something we wouldn't have thought to talk about 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, is, again, let's use Champions as an example. Now with Champions, I built, some of it I inherited. I inherited Kamala Khan, I inherited Nova, I inherited Spider-Man.
Miles.
Miles Morales Spider-Man. None of these are white kids.
Oh, yeah.
And then I thought, and then it was like, we need a bruiser on the team, let's put in the Hulk, Amadeus Cho. Hey, wait a minute, he's not a white kid either.
Yeah.
And so we leaned into that, rather than run away, and we leaned into that and thought, and what I'm trying to say is a very difficult balancing act, because on the one hand, you don't want to patronize by deliberately loading up with non-white minority characters. On the other hand, it pleased me that there were enough characters existing that were not straight white characters, that there was a pool to draw from, and so, we leaned into it to some degree.
Yeah.
So I think very different from, like you said, even 10 years ago,
Yeah.
where the crop to choose from
Yeah.
was all a bunch of white dudes.
Right.
And the Falcon.
NFL.
Yeah.
So I think now you know, without even having to create new characters,
Right.
there's enough
Yeah.
that you can make a representative team
Yeah.
that looks like, you know, that
Yeah.
looks like the audience.
Yeah,
It looks
sure.
like the world outside the window.
And one
Except
of
for
the-
her, I'm not sure about the horns.
One of the satisfactions of doing this kind of work is sometimes this serialized story will suggest another one. You can allow yourself to be inspired by your own work.
Oh, yeah. So, before I open up to questions, and we have a few minutes, real quickly, everyone, is there someone's work on a teen comic book when you were reading that really stuck with you?
Yeah. Jim Shooter.
On the Legion?
On Legion, and then later on Avengers.
Avengers, okay.
But Jim Shooter was, I would, you know, he was the first, and he actually would, I would say he wouldn't be the first, he came in '66. He was the very first writer at DC to come in and ascribe specific personalities.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yep.
kept notebooks.
Have notebooks and stuff.
Yep.
And I, as a kid, responded so well to that
Mhm.
because these characters actually had voices.
Mhm.
And whereas the Justice League at the time, as great as it was, you could have taken any of their word balloons and moved them around the individual characters.
Pretty much.
So Jim was my inspiration.
All right, anybody else?
Well, I thought the Marvel family was my
Yeah.
big favorite. Uncle Marvel was particular.
Save that because in about 15, 20 minutes we're doing the Captain Marvel panel down the hall. So that was Shazam panel. All right, John Brown.
Roy Thomas on Avengers.
Yes.
This is before Roy Thomas got anal and destroyed his career. But one story into the next story, and my guideline is, if it's a continued story, can I not wait for that next issue? Do I have to have it right now? And he did that to me.
Claremont and Byrne X-Men and Shooter on Avengers when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then when I sort of rediscovered comics in high school, in, you know, end of high school, was Marv and George on Titans.
Yeah.
That which is, you know, Titans is essentially a Marvel book. You know, it's a
Oh,
Marvel
yeah.
style book.
Well, it's Marvin George taking everything they learned across the street and bringing
So
it to
that was, I mean, those three really, you know,
Yeah.
kind of set up the way I saw comics as a whole, and very specifically teen books.
All right.
Did you respond to Steve Englehart at all?
Now he keeps leaving me messages though.
Steve Englehart, Steve Englehart did
not-
a huge run.
Not as, I think I was too young
Yeah.
to really grasp that,
Yeah.
that this was a specific person.
Right.
You know, like the Avengers stuff and the X-Men stuff is when I was of an age,
Yeah, yeah.
whatever it was, 8,
Yeah.
10, something like
Yeah.
that, where I could detect this is a different artist from that artist, this is a different writer from that writer, and so those were the ones that really made an impression on me, more so than anything that came before.
Englehart's Justice League was interesting because he signed on for 12 issues and he wrote the 12 issues and there was a long couple of threads he was playing with, giving us the Manhunters as a big cosmic thread among other things. But his Avengers, I thought, succeeding from Roy was really interesting because he went very cosmic and he played up the power. And
Yeah, but what he did that no one else had done is give permission for characters within the team to not like each other.
Ah, yes.
And not to the point where we as readers would dislike either of them, but you know, the character conflicts that would last, that would stick, and that's what I really take away from it. And in the Justice League run, right, Wonder Woman and Flash really just kind of were at loggerheads.
Yeah.
And that didn't get resolved. It was just the way they were.
Right. Before that, all there was Hawkman and Green Arrow bickering, which was Lynn's contribution to Justice League.
And it adds a kind of texture to it because we like to see people argue.
But it's also different points of view, which is interesting.
And we're used, I think, the other thing I wanted to add, this is sort of a non sequitur, but in a lot of the teen books that I read as a kid, you know, the Shooter Avenger stuff, my favorite issues were not the ones where they were saving Manhattan from an alien threat. My favorite ones were the ones where Beast and Wonder Man went out on the town and, you know, had a tiny adventure for one issue. because those were the exception rather than the rule, those are the ones that always stuck out to me. And those are obviously the more character-driven sort of stories where a good part of the team is paired away and 2 or 3 teammates go out and have some sort of adventure where they're not fighting Camp Nefaria. Those are the ones that always stuck with me as a kid, much more so than the big bombastic stuff.
That's what we did on Squad from time to time. We would do the personal files, and there was no overall story. There was just individual stories about individual characters. And some of the letters we got in said that they liked those best. So go figure.
But we have to be careful about that. The main complaint I've heard from, adults who decided to try comics is they could not understand what the fighting was about, what these characters were to each other. Because so many of us have been reading comics for 30 years and we know it. I mean, Martha Thomas has not missed an issue of Marvel or DC comics in 30 years. But you always want to go for the new reader and you want to give him or her or it enough information to understand this conflict that's happening in front of them. And not assume that, well, I was once doing a novel and I needed some Superman continuity and I had to read through 7 comics to get a proper noun. Who the hell was he fighting for 7 issues? Well, if you've been reading Superman all your life, you know.
And that's a matter of craft.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's a
it
matter
is
of,
exactly
of
what it
us doing our jobs, and I think we as an industry have fallen down on it.
But
I
it's
mean, I read books that the characters aren't named.
Yeah, a lot of writers took the lazy way of every time there's a team book, there's the little caption identifying them as opposed to doing it through dialogue or conversation.
So the feeling people get is this is a club and I don't belong.
Yes, you don't want a barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something special, something that is mine. That I think accounted for a lot of the failure, the business failure of comic shops, because you would walk into one, and if the guy behind the counter did not recognize you, he ignored you.
Which is why the Simpsons comic book guy, stereotypically captured what that was in the first 20 years of comic shops.
Yeah. How many left are left, do you know?
3,000 or so, I think, maybe 2,500. That sound right, Mark? You're
I
closer to
those are-
retail.
Yeah, I was less actually, like 17, maybe.
That few?
1,700 comic book stores in the US, yeah.
Yikes.
Somewhere along there. There's.
Support your local comic shop.
Yeah, it's either Wyoming or Montana, I forget, that for a while it did have no comic stores at all. Big state. Anyway, we have time probably for like one, you better pick one really good question.
Who's got the best possible question we've got?
Because we
You
don't-
sure?
Me?
Is it the best question possible?
It's a good one, but
Let's
it's
hear it.
something that
Okay, I'm short.
Because you've been talking about traditional team books, what about the really kind of the ones that blur the line a bit? Because unless I'm remembering this wrong, you, Mr. Wade, you worked on 52 all those years ago.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't necessarily describe it as a team book, but there's multiple teams, and they're technically all one narrative. Like, what's it like dealing with that kind of team book?
It's a living nightmare.
That's why it took 4 writers.
Right, 4 writers and many meetings and many charts and many graphs and many index cards on bulletin boards and stuff. It's still just, it just harkens back to what we were saying earlier about we've got to keep up with everybody and make sure everybody has something to say and something to do at any given time. You got one more maybe?
Yeah, you, sir.
Is 7 sort of the magic number for team?
Yeah,
For us, give or take one?
For some reason, it seems to be.
Yeah.
To the point where, I'm sorry, but to the point where I kept thinking my entire 18-issue run, the Champions had 7 heroes in it when I would just relax, and it never did. It had 6 from the very beginning. I just automatically defaulted to 7 in my head.
I think an odd number.
Yeah.
I mean, other than Fantastic Four, I think like 5, 7 is, and I don't know why.
John, Bob?
It may be, it's easier to pair off if you're evenly numbered. This way you can mix and match differently. I don't know.
But seven, but there's, I think we're all agreed up here, right, that for whatever reason,
Yeah.
whether or not we feel that way, 7 seems to be the magic number.
And that might even be more of a spatial concern for what you can fit on a page.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, how many
Okay.
characters, what you can fit on a page, how many characters you can fit in the panel on that page. Because that sort of structure is even more important when you do a team book. Because you gotta figure out, where everybody's gonna be.
Well observed.
All right, thank you so much for your time and attention.